behind the scene is John in Cleveland. We will be recording this today, so your folks can come back and review it at a later time if they were not able to attend. We do have a large group today, so Juan will try to answer as many questions as possible, but let's make it as interactive as possible as well. So again, Juan Scott has a JS Consulting Group, and he's worked with the Atlanta FEB extensively, and he's offered to do a few trainings for us up here in the Heartland. So we welcome today, and without further ado, I will turn it over to Juan.
Well, thank you, Larry. Good afternoon, and I hope everyone is doing well this afternoon, this morning. As Larry said, I'm Juan Scott, and I'm delighted to be with you this afternoon to talk about change management, which is a really important topic, particularly when we're talking about leaders and trying to incorporate change management into your organizations. And so I'm going to share my screen here and bring up the presentation, if I may, so we can talk about change management. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Awesome. So I wrote this course, and this course is called Change Management from the Bottom Up. And I wrote this course because as I traveled in my own experience and as I work with other organizations, I started to see that there were some patterns in organizations having difficulty in managing change, and not only managing change, but managing effective change. So I put together a course that has helped organizations be able to manage this from the bottom up. And so at the end of our presentation today, what I hope that you're going to be able to take away is a tool that you'll be able to use immediately in change management. And so if you can go into the chat room and just type, share some insight as to what you expected to get from this class today. And while some are typing, if someone wants to answer out loud, you may do that as well, because I love the interaction that we get whenever we are communicating. So what are some of the things that you want to get out of this class as we talk about change management? And so a little background on me as you're typing those things in. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm currently in Washington, D.C. I am here for an assignment. I'm also in the Air Force Reserves. And so I'm stationed in Washington, D.C. as a reservist. So I travel back and forth between Atlanta and D.C. for my reserve duty. And so I happen to be in D.C. this week. And so I'm excited to be here and also to share with you. But I've worked in federal government, worked in corporate government, and I also have done a lot of work in the private sector as well as with government in consulting and facilitating workshops. And so this is my special place. I enjoy it very much. I'm also parent of two great kids. I have a senior in college and I got a senior in high school. So I'm almost at that point of empty nest. And so excited about that, my wife and I, as we begin to prepare for next chapters in our lives. And so that's just a little bit about me so that you can understand kind of who I am. And so as we look at change management, let's look at what we're going to cover today. So what is change management? We're going to talk about some adversities to change management, gaining trust for effective change management. And then I'm going to walk you through a proven process for effective change management. Okay. So let's look at change management, our definition of change management that we have here. Change management is a term for the methods and ways that an organization prepares, supports, and helps its employees, its teams, and processes to handle and benefit from change. And so let's look at what we shared there. It helps not only the organization, but it helps the employees and the teams, because that's important in terms of change management, being able to make sure that we are focused on that being effective for those people. And here's some categories that we should look at in terms of change management. Awareness. Every individual involved in the change must be aware of it at the initial stage. I know that's not always possible, even if they don't agree with the change. And I'm dealing with specifically with leaders today. So as leaders, your teams aren't always aware of these changes when they're happening, because sometimes these changes happen at a level that's higher than you. And so what I want to teach today is how we communicate that change down in a positive way. The second thing is desire. Every individual must be convinced that the change is desirable and beneficial. And so as leaders, we begin to talk about this change and how this change will benefit the organization. And I know that you're already saying, well, Juan, what if I don't agree with that change personally and what it's going to do for the organization? Well, we're going to talk about that as well. So knowledge. Individuals must be informed on the need for the change and understand it. Key there, ability. Each person must also be given the ability to change. This may include change in processes, tool, education, or training. If the ability is not there, individual change will fail. And lastly, we're going to look at reinforcement. This stage allows for individuals to input along with analyzing and discussing the change. This is really, really important. The entire individual unit is reinforced and acknowledged by management that change can succeed on a sustainable basis. And so as we go through the process, I just want you to understand, what basic change management is, some of the components of that change management. And now we're going to look at some of the adversity involved in change management. And so the biggest two things that I hear when I'm in organizations working with change management is they're not a part of the process. And so by not being a part of the process, they don't feel like they've had any input as to this change or any discussion about how that change is going to impact the organization. Number two, the anxiety level that comes along with change in any organization or in your personal life. Anxiety comes because the thoughts happen that the change is not well thought out. And so I just want to have a conversation with you for a moment as we talk about the adversity to change. As leaders, let's talk about some of the things that you experience when change is coming down in an organization. What are some of the things that you naturally feel as a leader when change is happening in your organization, change management?
Just because I hate typing.
Okay, yes,
I would say the immediate response to change, right? That initial resistance on the part of, not everybody, but maybe some people. And then, so that initial display of resistance, and then the hidden resistance, right? People who just put on that friendly face, like, yeah, this is a great idea, but behind the scenes, like, oh my God, I think this is the dumbest thing ever. So right. Yeah, I mean, just the different reactions to change and how that's exemplified in day-to-day operations it's a huge factor.
Thank you for sharing that. Others, what are some of the things that you experience when you hear that change is coming in your organization that you experience personally? And the reason that I'm asking this question, because a lot of the things that impact you as a leader when it comes to change and change management, it also impacts your team members in the same way. So I want to hear some of the things that you are experiencing when you hear that change is coming.
I think when I experience change, mine is more so not really anxiety, but just a little curious as to what's to come, so thinking ahead as to what the changes will bring about in the organization, but not being fearful of it, but just more curious about, what will happen. But, in the government, you've got to be flexible. So that's something that, we're used to adapting and being flexible, but the curiosity is still there.
Okay, that's great, because the curiosity is there and with that curiosity, you're right. What does it come back to? How will this impact me? How will this impact the organization? Isn't that what we experience most times when we're thinking about that curiosity? What will change?
Yes, exactly.
Thank you. One other, before we move forward, what do you feel? What do you think of when you hear that change is coming? And what are some of your adversities to that change?
I would say management style.
Okay, elaborate a little more on the management style.
If before you had a free flowing manager and this one time around is micromanagement.
Okay. All right, so you're concerned with the tone. So when change comes, sometimes you're thinking about, okay, how's the tone and the culture of the organization going to change? Awesome. So here's
One, I also think about like, you know, what's coming down the pipe. And so I sort of prepare myself and just remember that, you know, with change, you know, it's always not immediate. Sometimes it takes, you know, it's a process, right? It happens over time. So I just, you know, continue to remind myself that, you know, this is a process. It is going to take a little bit of time to get that sort of buy-in and everybody on board and working along the same process. So I, you know, just try to be patient.
That's good. That's good, because patience is always a great tool to have in your tool chest, you know, when it comes to change, because all change is not quick and swift. And so that's great to have. Thank you for sharing what some adversities are to change. And as you think about your adversities to change, I want you to think about that your team members are experiencing some of the same things, especially if there's little or no communication within the team. And then I call it the principal syndrome. You know, sometimes when we're in grade school, we sat on the principal's bench and we saw the principal when we did something bad, or there was some behavior that needed to be corrected. And so sometimes we bring that same kind of style to our workplace when we only communicate with our employees whenever something is going wrong, and we don't have that regular communication with them, either by email or by Teams, some sort of regular communication that we have with them, so that they only see us when bad things are happening or something needs to be corrected. And so let's move on to the next area. So let's talk about gaining trust for effective change management, because trust is really an important factor in the workplace. It's important for us as we trust our leaders, and it's important for those whom we lead that they can trust us as well. So if you want to have an effective change management, there has to be trust in the organization. Let me see a show of hands, you know, if you agree with this, that you must first have trust, and that trust is really important when you're talking about change management. How many feel that trust is really important? Great. It is important. And I want to share 3 questions with you that I use in one of my communications classes that I teach. Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. And thank you. So, and here are 3 questions that really speak to what employees are looking for from their leaders. And the first question is, can I trust you? Can I trust you? And that's huge, because employees want to feel that their leaders are leading in a way that's going to be, first of all, beneficial for the organization, and it's also going to be beneficial for them for their personal growth. And so that's the first thing. Can I trust you? Can I trust you as a leader? The second question that employees ask is, will you help me? Because whenever we are managing an employee, and let's say that we didn't hire this employee, but we inherited this employee through coming to this role, sometimes we embark upon an employee who others may deem a problem employee or a non-performing employee, but this employee may be suffering from what I call leadership PTSD. And leadership PTSD is a term that I use when you have worked for someone and that wasn't a great working relationship. And it could be because you were not rated well in that relationship. You did not have a great relationship with that particular leader. You and that particular leader just never got off to a great start. There are a number of reasons why leadership PTSD comes into play. And I've had some leaders in my past that has given me some leadership PTSD. And when I embark upon a new leader, I'm immediately reflecting and hoping that I'm not going to gain in this new leader what I experienced in the old leader. And what that involves sometimes is being able to allow yourself to put the distrust away to give this leader a chance. And so that you can see that this leader is not going to do to you the same things that you experience with the other leaders. So this second question is really important as well. Will you help me? Because many times our employees are looking to ask, will you help me in a number of ways? And the last question that is important in terms of gaining trust is, do you care for me? And do you care for me comes out in a number of ways. Do you care for me comes out in ways, are we doing my appraisals on time? My assessments. When we sit down to do the assessment, are we actually looking at things that's going to help me grow as a person in the role that I'm currently playing? So do you care for me, what's going on, in my life in case there's a sick child or a sick spouse or aging parent, any number of things. But employees want to know that they're cared for. And so in order for us to gain trust to do effective change management, we have to make sure that we are able to answer those 3 questions in the employee's mind in a positive way. And when I teach this class, I also flip the script on these 3 questions, because these are also 3 questions that you as leaders can ask your employees when you're sitting down and talking with them. Because here's the way that you can use these 3 questions as a leader. Can I trust you to do the task that you are assigned? Can I trust you to be here on time and to work unsupervised to get these things done and meet the deadline? Will you help me by being an influencer within our organization when change is coming or other things are happening, by affirming the things that we're doing, creating that team cohesion? And then the last one, as a leader, you can use this question: do you care for me? So if you care for me, you're going to do those things that are necessary for us as an organization to meet our goals, so that we can always make sure that we are effective in the things that we're doing. So I'm going to stop at this point. What do you think about these 3 questions and the impact they can have in your organization and your leadership?
I think they're extraordinarily important to ask of not only your employees, but also ask the supervisors, and have the supervisors ask you, right? So it's a two-way street. And I think it's really important to kind of lead with these questions in mind, and kind of always have them in the forefront, because you're right, gaining trust is probably the most important thing to effective change management.
Awesome, thank you. When I ran across these questions years ago, they just caught me, because they are simple questions, but they're such powerful questions that can be used, as you said, both ways. When dealing with our team members and ourselves as leaders, when we're dealing with our leaders, these are 3 questions that are important to us. So are there other thoughts on how these 3 questions can put you in a better position to create that effective change within your organizations?
I think the only thought that I have here, I think they're great questions. But I think, gaining trust has to start before a change is ever initiated, and it has to continue after that change is complete. And so if you're going to use these questions, it's not just when change is about to happen. It's something that has to be a continuous conversation.
Bingo, 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 bingo. You're absolutely correct. Trust has to begin initially in the relationship, and I pulled these questions to be a part of this change management, because trust is so important, in our roles, that we have that trust. And you're absolutely right. It has to come before change comes. We need to have that trust. And if we have that trust when change comes, it makes the change a lot easier to execute. But this trust factor is just huge. And so in all of your leadership, whenever you are sitting down with your employees and you're having your meetings, I want you to keep a copy of these 3 questions, and keep these questions in mind as you're dealing with them, and ask, am I building this kind of relationship with my team, where they can answer these questions in a positive way? And here's the great thing. If you're not doing that at this point, it's okay, because there's always a next step. And here's a place where you can pivot and say, you know what, I'm going to start to incorporate more of this into my leadership so that I can gain that trust, so that we can be more effective as a team. Because I realize, you know, how important this trust is, because even with the relationship that you have with your leader, you're asking these same 3 questions. You know, can I trust you? Will you help me? Do you care for me? Because regardless of where you are in your career, whether you're in a transition point, or you're looking for promotion, or you're about to transition into retirement, these are all 3 questions that we have, you know, in our career with those whom we're leading and those who are leading us as well. So really important that we gain that trust. Any questions or comments on anything that I've covered so far? Because I love your interaction. So I want you to feel like you can stop, raise your hand, and jump in and ask a question, or make a comment if you want to. I love the interaction. Are we doing well so far? Is the material good to you so far? Show of hands. Awesome. Awesome. So let's continue. So we talked about gaining trust. So now let's go to the next thing that we need to look at. Let's look at the actual process that I put together for creating this change management. And so this is something that you as a leader can use that's going to help you really be able to create effective change in your organization from the bottom up. And the reason I say that we create this change from the bottom up, because as a leader, you are engaging your employees. And so I did this workshop with the Department of Labor back in 2021. And I was dealing with a new supervisor who was coming in to lead about a new region. And at the end of the training, we had some feedback after the training was over. And she shared with me, she said, you know, the information that I gained from this exercise, it would have taken me a year or more to be able to get this much information from being with the team. But this simple exercise helped me gather and be able to put my hand on the pulse of where the issues are in the team immediately, so that we can move forward and we can move forward together. And so as I introduce this process, feel free to stop and ask questions or raise your hand if you have questions as we move through it. But here's the first thing that you want to do. You want to get your team together. Okay, and you want to have a dry erase board or a flip chart. And when you have that flip chart, the first thing you want to ask is, what's going well? What are we doing well as a team? Okay, and so when they start to tell you what's going well, I want you to write those things down on the flip chart or on the dry erase board, so that you start to list out the things that are going well. And, you know, as leaders, you already understand that people like to talk about what's going well. And so this opens them up to sharing those things. And there is meaning behind the order that I have here. And so after they tell you what's going well, you get those all written down, and you may get between 5 and 7 answers. Okay, so after we get those down, then here's the next question I want you to ask. If you were in my seat, in my role, you know, what are the things that you see that needs to be improved? What are the things that you see that need to be improved? And so we start with what's going well, because that opens them up and gets everyone talking. Now you create this environment where they can tell you what's not going so well. And so they begin to list the things that are not going well on the flip chart. So on the other side of the flip chart, let's start to write down what's not going so well. And so team members will gladly start to share these things, you know, particularly if you're a new leader coming in and they want to see some change happen, or if you've been with them for a while and you've never done this before, here's a way for you to introduce, you know, this to them to figure out what's happening within that particular team. And so after you get a list of items on the board that needs to be improved, now we want to do this. Now we want to turn our attention back to the team and say, thank you for your contributions of letting me know what's going well and what's not going so well. So in terms of the things that's not going so well, let's rank them in order of most important for us to improve right now to least important. And what you're doing in this particular exercise is you're allowing the team members to share with you what they think are the most vital things that need to be changed in order to make the organization more efficient, processes more fluid. And so when you go down the list of items, you point to the first item on the board and you said, so ask for a show of hands. How many people think this is our most pressing issue? And so as they raise their hands, you count the number of hands that's up, and then you write that number beside that particular recommendation. And you take the second recommendation and you do the same thing. You ask for a show of hands who thinks that's more important, and you write that number beside them. And you go through each one, writing the number beside them with the number of hands that show that is raised. So after you go through all the things that are on the what needs to be improved list, what you want to do now is look at the numbers that you've written to the right. And so let's say the first one has 15 people said that's the most pressing issue, and the next number was like maybe 12, and the next was like 10 and like 8. And so what you want to do is you want to point out the item that got the highest number was this item. And so does everybody agree that this is the most pressing issue that is facing our organization right now and impeding our ability to be more efficient? And if they all say yes, then what you want to do now is write a 1 by that, because that's your number one pressing issue. So is everyone following me so far? Are there any questions about anything that I've shared so far in this process?
Juan,
Yes.
I just have one question maybe to consider when you're talking about like areas that need improvement and ranking them from most important to not as important. Even items that may be perceived or maybe didn't get as many votes and maybe were listed then as not as important. I think we need to be really careful about the language that we use, because it's important, obviously, to those 8 individuals, right? It's important to them, or maybe there was one item on the list that only got 2 votes. Well, it's really important to those 2 individuals still. So I think one of the things, as a leader that we need to be aware of is just how we're addressing those, and maybe not say we're going to rank them by importance. We're going to rank them based on, what do we need to take care of like right now? What's in the immediate future versus, saying most important or least important. That's what I think anyway.
Well, we have the same thought, just using different words. And so most important is what needs to be addressed immediately. I'm using those words interchangeably. So we're saying the same thing. And in terms of persons who ideas that may have gotten lesser numbers, we're going to keep those items on the board. We're not going to erase them because there are still things that need to be addressed. They just didn't rank in the top 4, top 5, but they will be addressed, within the process. Does that answer your question?
That makes sense. And I think that's probably where I was headed with this. It's still important to those 1 or 2 individuals. And then I think as a leader, you probably need to figure out why it's important to those 1 or 2 individuals and figure out, okay, am I missing something when I'm talking to this one person, or am I missing something in this one field that maybe needs, that is sort of garnering more attention or needs to garner more attention. But yeah, I see what you're saying. Thanks, Juan.
Yeah, you're welcome. And what's great about this exercise is that the team is informing you of the items that they feel is impeding the group. And so when you get your collective numbers, you can go back and say, is everyone in agreement that this is our most pressing issue? And so they are the ones that's providing you as the leader with the information. And so stay with me. I'm going to bring some other things into the process as well. But are there any other questions or comments about what I'm sharing so far in this process? All right, so we are ranking them all now. And so now let's pretend that we have ranked the top 4 or 5 items that the team feels need to be improved. And we've gotten, number 1 through 5. And so again, I will come back and I will say, okay, let's look at the 5 things that we have here on the board that you have shared, that these are the most important things that we need to address. So I'm going to look at this again, and I'm going to ask, now with these ranked 1 through 5, do you still feel that we have this in order? And if not, let's just take one more vote. How many people think that item number 1 is our most pressing issue that we need to address immediately? And go down that line and be able to ask those questions. So after you get those done, the next thing that we're going to do is we have the numbers up there now on the board for which items are the most important or most pressing, 1 through 5. So now we're going to go back and we're going to ask, who wants to volunteer to lead this project? Okay. And most of the times what I've found when I've done this exercise, the person who has made the recommendation will ask to lead the project. And so then you put their name beside the project. And so you go through the exercise of putting the names beside each project who's going to be led. Then the last step is that I have here, ask for volunteers to work with project leaders. Now we go back and we ask the group, who wants to work with Ann or Mike on project number 1? Who wants to work with Larry on project number 2? And so we get people to volunteer to work alongside them. And so then at the end of this, what we do is we give them a moment to huddle together in a group to talk about their project, okay? And what they're going to do, maybe 10 minutes. And then we come back together. And then we decide that we're going to have them meet and put some timelines by the project. So project number 1, how long do you think it's going to take you to get this one done? Is it going to be 30 days? It's going to be 2 weeks? It's going to be 60 days. And we write that time on the right-hand side. Everybody tracking with me so far? Because what we've done so far, we have identified the areas that need the most improvement. We have a project leader who has volunteered. We have team members who have volunteered to help them out. So we have the problem and we have the people who are willing to work on that problem. Next, we're going to put a timeline on there to see when this is going to be resolved. And so we put that timeline to the side. Okay, this should take 30 days. And so they're going to come up with the timeline, how much time it should take to improve that, to make this change in this project. And so we put that down. Now, you as a leader, take a picture of this with your phone, have this recorded, because what you want to do at this point, you want to make sure that this becomes a part of your regular staff meeting, okay? And during your regular staff meetings moving forward, you're going to have reports by these individual teams so they can give you a quick update on the progress. And these updates shouldn't take more than, 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes max in your meeting to say, here's where we are on the project. We are 25% done. We are close to our completion date of whenever that is. And so what this has done for you, this has allowed you as a leader to gain from your employees the things that they seem are most probing, in the organization that must be taken care of immediately in order to move the organization along. And so they are very grateful for this process because, number one, they are being heard. They're being heard. And so many team members want to be heard by their leaders. And so the fact that you've taken time to go through this process and they're being heard about what they feel are the issues, instead of this top down, it's a bottom up approach, is tremendous. And so you as leaders, you thank them and congratulate them for being part of this process, in order to improve what we're doing. And so then as a leader, you add this last piece. I'm very grateful for the time that you've spent, looking across our organization and coming up with these lists of things that you think needs to be improved. Now, I'm going to be in some meetings as your leader that you're not privy to or not a part of. And so I want to be able to come to you after I come out of those meetings and add things to this list, that also needs to be a part of the process because of coming in at my level. Do you understand how I brought that in? And the importance of bringing it in that way? They've been able to share with you issues that they see from their level. And now what you're sharing with them is the fact that I'm in meetings and I am a part of roundtable discussions that you're not a part of. And as I'm made aware of these things, I want to bring these things back to you and add to this list as well, so we can work those things in the same way. What this does is it brings the team together in a way where it enhances the trust, because now your team members feel heard. They feel like they are a part of the change process. So they welcome what you are bringing in. And they also now are expecting you to come and bring things to them when changes need to occur, because you've just shared that with them. As I enter my meetings and I come back and forth, you know, there are going to be times when I want to add things to this list so that we can continue to improve. And to the earlier comment earlier, we have gotten through the top 4 or 5. After you've gotten through the top 4 or 5, now you may want to go back to your initial list and then start to rank the next 4 or 5 that you had on there, and then start this process all over. And eventually what happens, you get through the whole list of items that were mentioned by the team. But as a team, you work on these together by ranking which ones you think are the ones that are most important for us to work on. And as the leader, you get to interrupt this process. If something comes through with a higher priority that needs to be changed, you get to do that because you've already had that conversation with them to make that happen. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to take some questions or some comments about how you think this process would assist you in your leadership and with change management. Well, let me ask another question. Let me see a show of hands if you think that this is going to help you be able to bring about more effective change management within your organizations. Because I know that you're still processing. It was a lot of information. Awesome. I can tell you it works. And not only does it works very well because people feel empowered. And in the multi-general workforce that we serve today, it's important that we empower, you know, our team members to be a part of the process. And because I've worked on each side, I understand the importance of leading, I understand the importance of following, and I also understand the importance of bringing the two together where that trust has been established so that change can happen in a way that is effective. And so this method, you know, takes some time to work through. You got a quick version of this. I usually teach this in a half day or a full day session because there are more parts and we role play. But because this is an introductory session to this class, you know, I'm giving it to you pretty quickly. And so if we had more time, I would expand it some more and we would work through the process. But I hope you have a general idea of how this change management tool works from the bottom up. So do you feel like you could be successful at engaging this tool with your team? Let me see a show of hands if you feel like you could be successful at engaging this tool with your team. Okay, I have some takers here. Thank you. Thank you. So lastly, we talked about the importance of change management. And we talked about, you know, sometimes anxiety, sometimes curiosity, you know, that comes when we know that change is on its way. And so hopefully what this model will do for you is be able to introduce change to your team in a meaningful way where there is buyer input to the changes and how to affect the changes in your organization in a way that's meaningful. So I hope you enjoyed the concept and the process. And now I just want to have leave some time, our last few minutes for Q&A to answer any questions or scenarios that you may have that I can answer for you. Yes, I see one hand raised. Go ahead. Any questions or comments? Everybody's quiet.
Hi, Juan. My name is Karen. I just want to thank you. This is really helpful. I immediately can think of a situation where I can use this process that you just walked through. And I'm really eager to get that started. I think that's really nice a great way to engage from the bottoms up and yet still be able to bring in your own perspectives and needs, you know, to the team. It's a relationship. I think one question I have, you know, this definitely is working with teams, but I feel that this is very applicable when working with leaders too. Sometimes we as leaders, we have to work very directly with other leaders, and you know, there's always a potential of different points of view, different egos, different objectives getting in the way. But I think this could definitely be applied in leadership team type situations as well.
Absolutely. It can be applied both ways. And that's why I shared particularly the 3 questions, because those 3 questions are vital to team members, and they also are vital to leaders. And so I would be really interested in hearing how the process goes when you start to execute this within your team. I'm going to have a survey at the end that I'm going to send to Larry that he's going to distribute. And so my contact information will be there. I would love to hear from you after you start to execute this to see what kind of success you're having, or if you have any questions that I can answer for you.
I'll be happy to share that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Other questions or comments?
Hi, Juan. Michelle Rogers here. I enjoyed your process. And the thing that stands out to me in having the trust conversation prior to going into the process, the thing that stands out most to me is asking for volunteers to be leads of projects, and then asking for volunteers on those projects, and making sure that they are empowered to make decisions, you know, that are going to move the organization forward. And so having that conversation about trust first, and then allowing those volunteers to be empowered regardless of their position, right? If they're volunteering to be a lead of a project, they need to feel like they have the autonomy and the authority to move forward. And so in this process where maybe trust wasn't fully established and you got to the volunteer place, how have you seen organizations move past that ownership of decision-making and the authority to be able to move if the people who volunteer don't necessarily feel empowered to do so?
And so, you know, when they volunteer, what happens after the volunteering is your encouragement as a leader. When you thank them for volunteering to be a part of the change, you know, and when that encouragement comes from the leader, that involvement, that interaction from the leader, it starts to change the culture of the organization, particularly if it's an organization where there has not been empowerment given in the past, or you've had a leader who's not been visible to the team unless there are issues happening, not for the sake of team building and culture building, building a culture of inclusive thinking, you know, and project building. And so whenever you start to build in this way, there is not as much resistance. And even those who have resisted in the past, they take a pause and look at the openness and the fact that you didn't appoint anybody, everyone volunteered. That's what's so excellent about this. They're volunteering, you're not appointing. And so it's all a process because you opened the door as a leader and you've said, what do you think? And how many of us walk away and before we were involved in leadership positions, wanted to be involved in the change. We wanted to make contributions, but those opportunities were never made available. We're kind of always voluntold rather than bringing our ideas to the process to help. So this is how it encourages that trust to continue. And if you're at a place where your organization hasn't established that trust yet, here's what I'm going to suggest you do. When you have your next all hands meeting, you know, share the 3 questions, you know, and you can say something like this. You know, I was just in a leadership training and 3 questions were presented to us as leaders that we should consider as we are serving our team members. And here are the 3 questions that was given to us to think about. You know, can I trust you? Do you care for me? Will you help me? And I must admit, after I finished with that training, I went back to my office and I thought very seriously about those questions. And I thought about my own leadership. And does my leadership lend itself to those whom I lead, being able to answer those questions in a positive way? And so leaving that training, I'm going to be very intentional now in ensuring that as we move together, you know, as an organization, that I want to ensure that you understand that in my servant leadership, I want to make sure that there is trust and that you do know that I care for you in your career and what's happening with you, and that I will help you. And so having a conversation like that, introducing, saying that you went to a training and you were enlightened somehow, that's going to make you now be intentional about these 3 questions, opens the door now for that relationship to begin. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Can you repeat those 3 questions? Can I trust you? Do you care about me? And
Will you help me?
thank you.
Do you care about me? Can I trust you?
And how do you handle it when you know the answer is no?
Well, you know what? I like the honesty. So I respond with, thank you for your honesty. And so what that lets me know now is that there is work to be done by me to be able to earn that trust. Because as your leader, I want to earn that trust because I want all the talents and abilities that you have inside to be fully displayed on this team. And I know when you're not comfortable with a person that you don't give it everything that you have. And so by giving me your honest answer, it lets me know now that I need to make sure that I'm very intentional about creating an environment, you know, where excellence can exist here and that that trust is developed. And in this current workforce, you know, authenticity is so important. You know, people tend to see leaders from afar. And one of the things that I dislike very much about leadership is when people call you leadership and don't call you by your name, because when they refer to you as leadership, now you're a group, you're not an individual. And I love when employees refer to their leader by name. That says to me that they see you as an individual and not as this big conglomerate, you know, that just wields power.
That's a good point because I say management all the time.
Yeah. And
but I do lump them all together at the point because, well, there's a reason. And so they have to build that trust to, I guess,
right.
Individualize themselves, in my opinion.
And the same thing that we're expecting from them, let's look downward to the people that we're leading and not downward in a derogatory manner, meaning that on the org chart, they're underneath you. So they're looking the same way because some employees have been misused, misled, and so they have trust issues. And so when we learn that they have those trust issues in our intentional leadership, we help them overcome some of those trust issues so they can begin to be fully vetted team members and fully involved team members.
Well, I will say one thing. I definitely appreciate your class, but I will say as far as me as an employee, I do my best and I always do the best to provide excellence regardless of how they act. But I do understand that there are some people that don't.
Well, you're a person who has character and integrity. So I appreciate that. And I'm sure, you know, your leaders appreciate that and those who work with you appreciate that as well.
Juan, I would want to say one thing, and maybe you have a follow-up course to this one as well. This is a good course because I'm big on trust because I know that there's no way that any organization can succeed without it.
Yes.
Because if I don't trust you, I'm not going to give my all. And that's whether I am as a leader, you know, and my staff, I need their trust in order for them to do their best to succeed, to make the organization as a whole great. But then also I expect the same thing from, you know, top administration when as a leader. But I will say this also, another course, if it's, like I said, if it's not already in place, is for leaders to understand what distrust does to an organization. Because from what I'm seeing is that when I speak to some of the higher leadership, or more so our top leadership, not all of them, but some of them just don't get it. They don't understand the importance of it. When you have that superiority complex and you're reluctant to really listen to your leaders, those who, are in the trenches, those who, have their ears to the ground, those who are, working with the employees on a day-to-day basis, when you are reluctant to do that, they don't see how it may be a quick process or it may be a slow process, but the destruction is happening. And that breakdown will eventually come to the surface. And I'm seeing that sometimes, and at some point you get tired of beating your head up against the wall. That's the way I view it. And I step back. It's maybe not a good thing, but sometimes I step back and I say, hey, you know what? Sometimes you have to let people, they have to fall. And then they have to see, what they've done. But then then the other side of me is saying, don't let it get to that point. So that's why I was saying, maybe if you don't have a follow-up course of this, I think having this course, but then having them understand or adding to it as to what the distrust can bring about in an organization. And that's something that I don't see some of our leaders having. Is that understanding?
Well, that was action packed. And there is a follow-up course. There's a communication course that I teach called Everyone Communicates If You Connect. And I teach 5 connection principles and 5 connection practices, because an email is a communication, but it's not a connection. And so in this course, I teach listening. And so I taught a course 2 weeks ago, and I'm teaching this course today. And this course was an introduction to see what kind of response that I would receive from the Kansas City FEB. And so if Larry and the rest of you feel like I've received some favorable response from the courses that I'm teaching, then we're going to talk about me adding more courses for the Kansas City FEB. And some of those courses will be included. And so if you like what you heard today and you'd like to hear more, I encourage you to fill out the survey that's going to be distributed, and so that we can be able to share that information back with Larry so that we can bring some additional courses to the Kansas City Federal Executive Board. But that course does dive heavily into the communication piece. And I do a lot of work in the C-suite with senior leaders, in helping senior leaders to understand their impact, upon the workforce and the listening. And so, and it's great work that I get to do in sitting down with them and helping them to understand the impact of, active listening versus waiting to respond, because there's a difference between active listening and just waiting to respond. So we have about 2 minutes left. Any other questions before I turn this back over to Larry?
Hey, Juan, just one other thing. Are you, and maybe you addressed this in the very beginning, I signed on just a couple of minutes late, but are you going to provide the PowerPoint presentation? Because I really liked what you had in slide 6, I believe.
Okay.
Where I think maybe it was 6 or 7. It's the one with the graphic and the arrows.
Yes.
Yeah, it is 6. Okay.
Yeah.
That would be great. Thank you so much for your presentation
I'll
today.
provide that to John so that you guys can have a copy of it. And you are very welcome. Thanks for attending today. And so I want you all to understand that I just really enjoy what I do. And my goal always with training is to give you something that you can use immediately. I think those are the best trainings when you can take away something that you can use that day. And so I hope today with this change management course that you have another tool in your tool chest that you can use immediately to bring about positive results in your organization. My contact information is here if you need it, and it will also be on the survey that's going to go out.
Thank you so much, Juan. This was another amazing presentation. Thank you so very much. I look forward to sharing the video with everyone because we are recording, and I will also include the survey and the PowerPoints as you're willing to share them. So thank you so much, Juan. Thank you all for joining us today. And I look forward to further conversations and what more that we may be able to work out in offering. So thank you so much and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Have a great day, everyone.